All right, hey everybody, welcome to one more round. Today I'm excited. I got a special guest. I've known this guy his entire life, and him most of my life. But this is my brother Hunter Norris. But we were at Easter a couple weeks ago. We were talking, and I'm like, it'd be cool to have you on the podcast. We could talk about movies. So one of the things he does now is he does movie reviews for AZ Family and CBS. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he just won an Emmy last year with his team. But he's always been passionate about it, and it's one of the things I always admired about him was he knew that he was passionate about the movie world from a very young age. I remember watching, Nightmare Before Christmas about 700 times. I remember introducing him to the movie Scream, which is probably not a good thing to do as his older brother, but I did. He was maybe like 7 when he watched that. But that being said, one of the things our dad always told us was, find something you love to do and learn to make money with it, right? It's not find something to do and you'll never work a day in your life, because work is work. But find something to do and then learn to make money with it. And that's something that he's really, really done. He's edited videos for a long time. And back when I first started to learn how to speak on camera, this was the guy behind the film. We did, 100 episodes?
Yeah, something like that at least.
Yeah, of Aftershock weekly. And it was really cool because he would go out, he would get editing experience. This was maybe 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was getting, on camera, experience and speaking and not humming, hemina, with all my words and whatnot, which I still do. You guys listen to this. But so thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll have the conversation go wherever, but one of the things we'll start with is kind of what you do now. I mean, you do the video editing, but you're doing movie reviews. I know the answer to this, but when did you start doing movie reviews?
When I really first started doing movie reviews was when I was around 12 years old, I think. So I'm sure you remember Joe Blow, that website. It was Joe Blow's Movie Emporium, but that was the first kind of movie website I found out, and I was, reading a lot of that guy's reviews, and they had a whole bunch of different movie topics they would talk about. I also really got into Roger Ebert and Siskel and Ebert and Roper. I watched that a lot, so they kind of inspired me to, kind of start writing movie reviews. Our dad, he helped me build a website and everything, and I remember my first review was the Return of the King, Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. So it was January 2004-ish. I remember I first started writing, and so I did that for, I want to say, a couple years, and then over the years it kind of became just an on and off thing. Whenever I became passionate about a movie that I saw and I wanted to write a review of it, I'd write it for MySpace back when that was a thing, and then to Facebook and all that. But then it was around 2016, I remember I really got back into it again, and it was for 3.5 years that I was seeing so many movies and writing reviews for the website that you built for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then that kind of COVID happened, and that kind of messed up the movie industry. And then my friend and I, we got into a podcast at the time, so I kind of stopped focusing on the writing. Mm-hmm. And and then last February at the news station, they were talking about wanting to, expand more and have more content for their website. And I suggested that we didn't have any, movie reviews or really entertainment-related content. So I suggested to start writing movie reviews for them. So I've been doing that since last February. And I've just kind of, I think I'm at 110 at least, or something like that. I know I'm at least 100, but so kind of on and off. I thought about the math, of the on and off months and years over, but at least I want to say 10 years of my life I've written movie reviews.
Oh, for sure. And it's neat because I read a lot of your reviews, especially when I was building the website, for that, because it was cool because we had a little thumbnail of the different videos, and it would flip over and have the reviews and stuff. And you've got a very articulate way of explaining your viewpoint, which is what you have to do, if you're going to be someone that reviews and writes and all that. And you and I have talked a lot. There's a lot of movies we don't necessarily agree on, or we don't see the same way. But when you're looking at a movie, what are you specifically looking for? What's the lens that you view it through?
Well, a lot of people, when they say when they watch a movie or TV show or whatever, is they do it because they want to be entertained. And the way, like, and that's the exact way that I watch a movie, is I want to be entertained. I guess the way that I might be entertained is different than the way that some people might look at it. To me, it's since, you know, I went to film school for a few years and I got like a film production degree and a screenwriting degree, and so I kind of learned about the technical elements that, you know, go into making a movie, and like the, you know, artistic vision that certain filmmakers will have, and how that vision is influenced by the cinematography or the editing or the music or whatnot. And so when I go to a movie, like, I just want to, you know, experience the story in the way that the filmmakers want me to. And if they got a reaction out of me, then that's where I'm like, job well done. Because I've said to people, I can't remember what movie specifically, but it was like a horror movie, and it's a horror movie that, like, you know, I think it's called The Witch. That came out in 2016, but that's a horror movie that, like, you know, normally they don't freak me out that much, but that's a movie that genuinely like creeped me out and like got under my skin. And I remember, like, I was saying to a coworker, I was like, yeah, it was just like a horror movie, just made you feel bad at the end. I was like, you know, I just loved it. And they're like, how did you love it when you made you feel bad? And I was like, that's what the director was intending, was for me to feel dread. Yeah. And, you know, it's a horror movie. It's not supposed to be like fun exactly, but to me, like, that's just kind of what I look for, is I, like, you know, try to see what the filmmaker is trying to do, like what their intent is, and kind of how well that's executed.
Yeah, well, and one movie that comes to mind, like we were talking about last year, I had read your review on, or your review on the Von Erichsen family movie that came out, and what was it called?
Oh, the Iron Claw.
Iron Claw, yeah. So if you haven't seen that movie, I'm going to tell you don't. He would probably say yes. And I'm like, oh, he really liked it. And I'm a wrestling fan. I like wrestling. But I really didn't know much about the Von Erichsen family. Come to find out, I mean, they were really influential in the wrestling world. But it's just like, you go in there and 4 of the kids died. There was a 5th kid that died they didn't even put on screen. And it was like, I remember getting up to use a restroom in the middle of the movie, and I looked at my wife, and I'm like, I come back and said, hey, anybody else die while I was in the restroom? And she's like, no, not yet. And then like 5 minutes later, another kid died. I'm like, it's a very, however, it did make you feel a certain way. It was portrayed. So like from that perspective, I can completely understand. It was a well-written movie to show you that life and that family and that kind of thing. But I'm like, gosh. So I look for movies that like kind of make me feel good.
Yeah,
for the most part.
And I get that. And because I remember when I saw the movie, because I didn't know who, like, the Von Erichsen family were, like, either, you know, I'm not like a huge wrestling guy like you are, but like, you know, whenever I go see a movie, I try to, like, you know, I don't really watch trailers. I try to just like go kind of get surprised, but I have like a general idea of what it's at least about, like, before going in to see it. And I just knew with this movie, like all these people were saying, is like, this family has the most tragic backstory ever. And it's just like, this movie is going to be so sad and so sad. And I watched it, and it's a really sad, you know, depressing movie. But, you know, it's like, that's how their story went. And like you mentioned, there was like a 5th brother that also died that they didn't include in the movie. And the director said he didn't include that because he said audiences would just probably find it too unbelievable that another person died, but also like it just would have been way too much trauma for people. So like when I saw that movie, I thought it was fantastic, and I posted about it, and like you said that you really wanted to see it, and I was thinking, I'm like, I don't think Josh is gonna like this movie. I was like, I think he'll think it's like a good movie, but I don't think he's gonna enjoy it, because it's not like, it's a wrestling movie, but it's not like a Rocky type of like inspirational movie, so to speak.
And you're usually pretty good about that with me. If I'm like, hey, am I going to like this? And you're like, yep, you're going to like it. Yeah. And I will. But then if you know me, so you're going to be like, no, you're probably not going to like that.
Yeah.
So I didn't ask that question then. I do now. But yeah, like, so speaking of like some of the older movies, like and that's why we go to movies. That's why we watch movies, right? Things that either inspire us or make us feel a certain way. And films come, a long way in 110, 15 years or whatever it's been. And you started watching a lot of the classics. I remember at a certain point in your life, like some of the old movies. What have you seen in the evolution from, you know, back then when film was kind of new, and then you get into maybe even the Marlon Brando's days, which is a little older, like the Godfathers and whatnot. Do you still see movies evolving like they did, or is it just kind of at a stagnant point right now?
I mean, I think the movie art form and especially the industry is always evolving. I mean, the industry is just like any industry out there that's like focused on making money. They're going to be reactive and, chase trends and all that. But to me, I think a big thing of it is just like it's a pendulum swinging thing, where when movies first started out with like silent films and all that, and they were like 5-10 minutes long. They weren't like, then they started getting to feature length movies, and like we got to the talkies, when they started introducing like audio and all that, and that was a big controversy, and then that just kind of became the standard. And the thing is I think a lot of it is just like with how the industry is and how like the pendulum swings is that like currently, like we're focused so much on like remakes and reboots and franchises, like the Marvel movies and all that, and like kind of like getting like trying to appeal to people like, hey, these things, or you remember these things. And
is it more out of pure profit than that they're going after now, rather than trying to have that artistic thing? Because I agree, like it seems like everything's a remake, everything's just for profit. I haven't seen it swing back the other way where it's a little more artistic.
Well, I think it might swing back that way, but it's kind of like been difficult because of streaming and all that has kind of changed the landscape. But back in like the 30s, 40s, and 50s, when it was like the big studio system, and like that was like way back in the day when studios owned their own movie theaters, and if you wanted to go see a Paramount movie, you had to go to the Paramount theater and so forth. And companies now like Disney, they've kind of like floated that idea of wanting to kind of bring that, back. But like the studios kind of controlled everything, and eventually it became a bubble, and where these huge expensive movies starring big stars, they started flopping and underperforming. And then like Easy Rider, when that came out in the 60s with Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda, that was like a big like independent movie at the time. And that kind of ignited the whole like new wave independent movement that birthed people like Spielberg and George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola and all that. And so for the 70s and 80s, it became more of a artistic driven thing where filmmakers had more control. And then filmmakers like Francis Ford Coppola and other big filmmakers, they got too egotistical or too big for their britches or whatever. And then their movies start flopping, and studios are like, oh, we have to take control again. And so I feel like we're kind of swinging back to where, artists are giving more artistic control, but I feel like they have to prove a lot more that they're going to like have an ROI, or that they are like, a good investment.
It makes sense. It's kind of funny hearing you talk about those specific three directors, right? George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and Francis Ford Coppola, because like today we look back at them and they're like franchises, like gigantic films, the Star Wars, the E.T.s, all these, right? But back then they were just artists trying to make film. Like they hadn't done really the James Camerons of the world.
Yeah.
Like they hadn't really done anything yet. And then today it's like now they've got these multi-billion-dollar franchises that they built with their movies. And I wonder if they're I don't want to say I wonder if they're proud of that. I'm sure they're proud of their work, but I wonder if they're proud of what they've done for the industry.
I know they're proud of their work, but I think Spielberg himself has said that I don't know if he's blamed himself exactly, but he said that me and Spielberg, or me and George Lucas, we are, responsible, and they are, for like the whole blockbuster thing. With Jaws and Star Wars, they kind of invented the term blockbuster, with people lining up around the block just to go see the movie. And so, yeah, I think it's like they obviously, they're proud of like what they did and all that. But I do think, George Lucas, ever since he sold Star Wars to Disney, he's had very choice words about Disney and how they handle his property amongst many others. So I think they do recognize like the impact that their art did, like the positive stuff, but also that, the negative,
the high production, the big stars have to be in it, because like I don't think anyway Harrison Ford was a big star before Star Wars, was he? And now, I mean, like Harrison Ford's one of the greatest of all time, and like they discovered some of these folks, but now it's like it's almost expected that you have one of those guys or girls to carry your movie.
Yeah, and then there's also this, idea that some people have that the movie star itself is dying, like how back in the day, even like like I say that like just the 90s or even early 2000s, whereas like you could throw Tom Hanks on the poster and that would be enough. Like that movie's going to make $200 million.
Yeah.
And that's not as much of a sure bet anymore.
Right.
And especially as like these older movie stars are getting older and they're gravitating more towards television or streaming films and are not like headlining these movies that are coming out in theaters. And they're relying more on these younger actors who may not have a following, or, you know, it's also just a different world where it was one actress said that she was chosen over a much better actress. So she even acknowledged it. She's like, a much better actress than me auditioned for this role, but I had more Instagram followers, so that's why they picked me, because she had, you know, more clout, so to speak. So yeah, I think that's just another thing is like, you know, you have your Tom Cruises and all that, but Tom Cruise is 62, and a lot of people say like he's the last movie star, and because there's not like a whole lot of actors nowadays that you can imagine like that they're like the main selling point.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, there's only a handful. There's the Matt Damons. There's I would say Christian Bale. Like one of my favorite movies in the last 10 years is Ford versus Ferrari. That was a fantastic movie. And what was nice about that is it wasn't them, their persona. They really personified their character so well that it made that movie amazing. And all of the other pieces around it was amazing. But there's very few actors like that. Tom Cruise carries the entire movie of every Mission Impossible he's ever done. And you said you just saw the most recent one?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Like, and you know what you're getting. Just like when you watch Fast and Furious, which I know we're both fans of that series. Yeah, get it. You know what you're getting when you get there. You're going to get amazing action. You're going to get some stuff you've probably never seen before. But it's, it's going to be vanilla to a degree to where, you're going to leave and be like, oh, okay, that was good. It's like eating, a handful of candy.
Yeah.
And then afterwards it wears off.
Or I don't know if you saw The Beekeeper with Jason Statham.
Hey, I enjoyed it.
And so like, I wouldn't say that was a great movie.
No.
Like I think I gave it like a 6 out of 10 or something like that. It was all right. But I remember I saw it with my friends in the theater, and we had a good time while watching it. And when it was over, like the first thing I said to my friends, I was like, "That was some quality nonsense." Like like they're like the Fast and the Furious, like they're nonsense and they're stupid, but they're, that's the other thing is movies have gotten a lot more self-aware. Now to like, oh, we know that we're like Fast and the Furious. They know at this point like that people kind of like make fun of them or like view them in like a tongue-in-cheek type of way, whereas like, oh, like like that one where they went to space, or like people were joking about that, like when are they going to go to space, and then they finally did it. And so it feels like movies are also like becoming very self-aware, and kind of like as a cynical person it bothers me that they're becoming more cynical, because I wish like earnestness would come back to like movies where you don't have to make fun of it. You can be making like a dumb, silly movie, and you don't have to make fun of yourself. You can just be that, Yeah,
that's true. So, what would you say was the greatest decade of movies?
That's a tough one, because that's another thing with like talking about movies to especially movie fans can be really exhausting, because a lot of people like to view their opinions as not opinions, but as facts.
Yeah, of course.
And that's the thing is like, I don't know if I could say like any decade is the best, because every decade like has their classics. And
for you, what's the best for you, and from your perspective, not necessarily subjectively, what's yours?
I mean, I would probably it's hard, because like I would say like a lot of like my like iconic movie memories are formed when I was growing up. And I feel like that's why a lot of like, people of your age like would say like, oh, the 80s were the best, or if you go older, the 70s are the best. Or there are a lot of people my age, they'll say, the 90s were the best. And but like I would say just in general, like the 90s were the best decade for me, because I was a kid, and that's just like what I remember. But I wouldn't say the 90s were like the best decade for movies. Yeah, I don't. The thing is, if I say the 70s, it's the 70s or 80s, I feel like it vindicates those people that just say they haven't made a good movie since 1985.
Right.
And so, I don't know. It's a tough one. I would probably go with like probably the 70s. The 70s had a lot of really good movies, and that's when like it was kind of like that perfect like intersection between artistic-driven movies and studio-driven movies, where studios were giving them money to do stuff, and these artists weren't as egotistical to waste money at that point, I guess.
Well, and like the 70s was an interesting time for movies too, because you had obviously the Star Wars, which was at that time like a huge production type of movie. It was like a whole nother galaxy, and amazing. It hadn't really been done. But then you also had the very simplified, not mass-produced Rocky, right? It's my favorite series. Obviously, this podcast is named after that. But if you really go back and you watch the Rocky films, I mean, you know the story about Sylvester Stallone, right?
Yeah.
He wrote, I think he sold his dog.
Yeah, and he bought it back.
Yeah, and he bought it back. But like, they had offered him, just for the script, a certain amount of money, and it was a lot of money back in the 70s. But he couldn't be Rocky. And he turned down all that money for a very small portion of money just so he could play the character, and obviously it launched his career. But they did that on a budget. That was a very, very budgeted film. And then you got the greats like The Godfather that was in the 70s. So I would say my position on the 70s is like that was one that storytelling was definitely at a high, for
I agree.
sure. And it wasn't always just mass production. It was just flat out storytelling. Because like The Godfather, there's not like a bunch of stunts or anything like that. You watch that, 1, 2. I don't think I've ever watched the third, but I've watched the first. The first 2 are really good.
Yeah.
The Rocky movies, they're all, except for 5, they're all really good. But they tell stories, and I think that was where I would see the evolution going in. I think comedy, though, I would have to say the 80s was like that first real breakaway with comedy, and really a lot of what we see today in the the early 2000s through today stemmed from that.
Absolutely.
Your Caddyshacs of the world, your Naked Guns of the world, your Dumb and Dumber, which I think was like 91 or 92. 94.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing you got to know about Hunter is he can literally tell you pretty much down to the date of when a movie came out. In fact, that's kind of how you know dates of the rest of your life, right?
Yeah, I do. I associate important dates with movie releases and stuff, and that's how I remember some things. It helps.
Yeah, which is amazing. Like you used to do that. Like, oh yeah, that weekend such and such came out. I'm like, how do you remember that?
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. I think you get that from Gramps for sure.
To be honest, though, with the amount of movies I see now, and like I see so many movies, like sometimes I'll see like 2 or 3 movies a week and review them, and sometimes I saw Mission Impossible on Monday, which was just 4 days ago, but it doesn't come out until next Friday. Mm-hmm. So with the amount of movies I see, and sometimes I see them so early, it's like I feel like that's kind of skewed my whole dating, my whole how I date things process, because like now I'm like thinking like, man, when did I see that movie? Because I see like sometimes up to 10 movies a month now. It's a lot.
It's crazy. I maybe see 10 movies a year.
Yeah, maybe. Most people do. Yeah.
So streaming, right? This has been a whole revolution over the last 20 years. I mean, when streaming first really kind of started, it was Netflix when it started, right? It was like you get a DVD in the mail, and then it was like, oh, we're gonna have a streaming thing to where now you have access to all of these movies, and they were like, in the beginning it was like a bunch of B movies that you didn't really need access to, but that was their streaming, and then that evolved, and then you got the Hulus of the world that came out, and today it seems to me like TV series have really overtaken the entertainment world. Not like it used to be. I mean, we all watched sitcoms and things growing up and series and whatnot, but it wasn't like that in the 90s. I mean, we would watch a half-hour Home Improvement, or we would watch, House or something in the early 2000s. But today, it's like you can binge watch everything. I think that's what streaming's really done. How do you see that affecting the movie world?
I think it kind of affects the way that watching something has become like a communal experience, and I think that's a big part of it. Like with watching a movie or especially a TV show, back in the day when it was a week-to-week thing, some streaming services do that. Some do the binge model like Netflix, but some like Disney Plus, they do a week-to-week thing. Yeah. And I actually prefer the week-to-week thing, because not only do I just not prefer binging, but I like watching an episode and then if the storytelling's really good, they'll make you want to see what's going to happen. But then over the next week, like I remember when the last season of Better Call Saul was going on, and there was like a dozen or so people at the station that were watching it, and it was great just every single week being able to talk about the recent episode and what we thought was going to happen next and everything. And I feel like with streaming, with the binge model, that kind of takes away from that, where it's just like, oh, the new Stranger Things season has just dropped. Did you watch it yet? No, I'm probably going to watch it this weekend. Oh, I just watched all 12 episodes when it dropped because I had nothing to do. And so you have all these people who have watched it, and they're, you know, talking about spoilers online and everything. You have all these other people that haven't watched it yet. And they're like, hey, I haven't watched it. And so I think it's kind of like fragmented, like the kind of viewing experience, because it used to be very like communal, where, you know, when Seinfeld was on, it was a show everybody watched, and the next day, you know, you wanted to talk about Seinfeld with your coworkers in the most recent episode or something, and it doesn't feel like it has that same like allure.
I agree with you. Like, yeah, Seinfeld, The Office, you know, those types of shows, you know, you wait for it. And I remember we all watched, get those in a minute. But we all watched Breaking Bad, like the last couple episodes together. I would come over to the house, you and Dad would watch it, and it was great, but that was communal. Now, today, my favorite way for it is like, you know, if you watch Cobra Kai.
I've seen episodes of it.
Okay, because I think you just told me you just finally watched The Karate Kid after, you know, being, you know, 34, whatever, you're 34 now?
34.
Which it also one of my favorite movies. But Cobra Kai was awesome because it came out, I think in 2021 was the first one, so it was like still, COVID was still like lingering around and everything, and it gave us, and I want to say actually it was 2020 in the late 2020, and they just launched all the episodes for a season. Like, this is amazing, and you get to watch it all. But again, I can't sit there and talk about, you know, the whole season to somebody who's only watched 2 episodes because, you know, they're not caught up, or they didn't have 5 hours of their life they could just dedicate to watching something. But you lose that. My favorite way to do it, though, have you watched Reacher?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so Reacher's on Amazon Prime. It's a really, really, it's just a fun series.
Yeah.
It's action. It's good. Yeah, it's very, very good. But when they don't just launch a whole season, what they'll do is they'll launch, I think, 3 episodes. So you get 3 episodes that you can binge watch those. But then they just do 1 a week for the next 7 weeks. So you get 10 episodes, but you have to wait on some of them. But they get you involved enough with the season to where you're going to carry on. So I think it's like the best of both worlds, to where you can get that. Because, you know, some people are sitting there on a Saturday night and like, what do we watch? And, you know, they want to spend 3 hours watching stuff, but they don't want to watch a movie. Mm-hmm. So they'll like, okay, well, let's pick this. Let's watch, you know, 3 or 4 episodes and do that. And they don't want to wait for the next season. So I think it's a happy marriage if they were to do that. My new favorite, Suits, the new Suits in L.A. Did you ever watch the original Suits?
Yeah, Dad's a big fan of that one. Though.
Yeah. Unless you want to like just completely do nothing for like a month of your life, you know, just wait on that, you know. But it's an amazing. I love it. I love Suits. Don't get me wrong. But there's so many episodes, and it's such a good series to where you will sit there and binge watch it like crazy. Well, the new Suits though, the L.A. is also very good, but now it's like out. They're just doing 1 episode a week on NBC. It's probably the best NBC, CBS type of thing that's come out in a long time. But I like that because it is like a waiting thing. And I just don't know. I think it seems to me that streaming and series, and specifically that are just all launched, are kind of killing the vibe for movies, because there's not that continuation of the story that people can watch and buy into. So that 1.5 hour, 2 hour, 2.5 hour, just all in one seems to have lost a little bit of the luster. That's kind of the way I view it. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, I kind of see it the same way, and I know what like you mean with like the way people watch TV and how like it's like long form storytelling, and you know, I think that's why like kind of mini series type series have kind of taken off. Like I haven't watched The White Lotus. Like I know that's a really popular show, but that's like I've told like a lot of people this now, because like there's a lot of shows, a lot of really popular shows I haven't seen just because I just haven't gotten around to it. But like I feel like a lot of TV shows, especially nowadays with streaming shows, like they don't feel like, a lot of people have said this as like a common sentiment, where they don't feel like series, but they feel like 10-hour long movies that are chopped up into episodes. Yeah. And so it's like this long form storytelling, and a lot of times it feels like that when they start writing a season or something of a show, they're like, okay, you have 10 episodes. Okay, but we wrote our scripts and we only have 5. They're like, well, you have 10 episodes, so make it work. And so you start adding in filler or subplots or all these other elements to like drag things out. And there's been like a few TV series I've watched, like even if they're only like 6 episodes, like I just feel like I just wasted my time. And because I feel like with TV shows, like there's this expectation that there's gonna be a continuation. Like when it's not just it's not like a mini series anymore. It's like season 1 of a show. It's not just telling a complete story, and that's why I prefer movies so much. And especially movies like as franchises get so crazy and expansive. Like why I like movies that have nothing to do with the franchise or anything, because it's going to be an hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours, and you know if the movie, for the most part you're going to get a complete story. And I feel like with TV you have to watch a whole lot more to get a complete story.
Yeah.
And like I've told Dad this, because Dad's like, you should watch this show, and I'll usually wait until the show is, if I'm not interested, I'll wait until the show is finished airing, because a lot of times these shows, they'll end on cliffhangers and then they'll get canceled. Yeah. Like they don't actually get like proper resolutions. And so that's why I prefer watching movies, because I know I'm going to get a resolution in a 2-hour time frame on average. But I know like just viewing habits have changed, and people like that model of being able to, have more.
Yeah. No, and that makes sense. Like having a resolution and also not having to spend all that time, And I've recently gotten back into watching more movies. Before it was a long joke in our house where we would start a movie, and this is kind of in my previous life when we were when I owned the digital agency and stuff and working like crazy and building that, we'd start a movie at 8 o'clock and I'd be asleep at 8:30, and Jess would watch the rest. And I just got to the point I'd be like, just tell me what happens. I'm never going to watch that. You should tell me. And I'm like, okay, perfect. I understand that movie. And now that I'm kind of in a different place now, like I've recently gotten back into watching movies, and I've enjoyed, some. And some I watch. I don't know about you. Do you ever watch the same movie over and over?
If I really like it, yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple like that. One of them is Founder, the one with Michael Keaton.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, I think I've watched that like 10 times. It's just one of those, I don't know why, it probably resonates with me just kind of in the business world. But he does such a good job of portraying that particular character. And then comedy. There's some comedies I can watch. I could watch Wedding Crashers probably. Yeah. Anytime it's on, like I'm going to leave that on. Grown Ups. Yeah. What are some of your like top? What are your top 5 movies you think everybody should see, whether they're a big film fan or not?
Oh, let's see. Top 5 movies everybody should see. That is a tough one, because like at first I thought you were going to ask for my favorites, and then it's like I don't know if I would pick any of my favorites like to say that people should see it. So I know it's like a cliche answer and every film school student hates it, but I do think Citizen Kane is a fantastic movie, and it's an example of a movie that I feel like, it's still relevant today, because at that time it was a criticism of William Randolph Hearst and the media and how much control he had over the media. So, I feel like with, the way that media is controlled by corporations and all that stuff, it feels very much like that. But also at the same time, I remember I watched it again a few years ago when me and Grant had our podcast, and he had never seen it before. And he agreed with what I said when we watched it. And I'm like, this movie's almost 100 years old, but it's very accessible to today's audiences. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't say it's not like entertaining, like it's not an exciting movie, but it's very well acted, very well shot, has a lot of interesting filmmaking techniques that when I watched it again, like I was amazed that people back in the 40s thought up of that stuff, that, stuff that filmmakers still implement today. So like, that's a big one. The original Halloween, I think, is a great example of how you can.
I've always been a Halloween fan.
Well, you're the reason why is because you rented that for me and my friends when I was like 10 years old or something, and I thought it was when it started, and like it's like showing Michael Myers' POV, like, and and I asked if that was Jason because I thought it was Friday the 13th, and you're like, no, that's Michael, and Michael's way better.
Yeah.
And so, but anyways, so yeah, I love the original Halloween, and I think that's like a perfect example of how you can just do horror on a simple, low budget level because they made that movie with barely any money. There's barely any blood in it at all, but it shows how it can be like a terrifying, scary movie.
The use of music in that movie was amazing.
Yeah.
And sounds, I should say in general, but music specifically. Like you're like, wow, it makes you feel something. But like, because if you take away the music, and it's like that with all movies, I would say, but like that one specifically, if you just took away the music and you just see like this random like point of view, you have no idea what's going on.
Well, that's what happened to John Carpenter because he composed the music for a lot of his movies, including Halloween. And when he showed the rough cut to the producer for Halloween, the producer was like, "This isn't scary. What is this? This is like the most boring movie ever." And then he went and did the music, and that music just changed everything. But that's like you bringing that up. I think that's a great example that shows how important music is to a movie and how could that influence it.
Alfred Hitchcock was one of the best at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Way before his time.
Yeah, and like Psycho is another movie that I would say is great and like holds up and one that people should watch. It's one of those things where I would try to like go through every genre and find like a specific movie from each genre.
What's a comedy that you think everybody should watch?
Ooh, a comedy that I think everybody should watch. Or
maybe a favorite of yours.
Because like my favorite comedy, and it's one of my favorite movies in general, is The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman. But that's a 60s movie, and I could totally see how people would say that movie's boring and not funny at all. But that's personally my favorite comedy. But as far as just like best and like that everybody could enjoy on some level, honestly, I'd probably say MacGruber.
MacGruber. I think I did watch that. It was good.
Because it's a movie that like it's very very juvenile and immature, but at the same time it's like the writing to it is clever in some way. Like I don't know, but that's a movie that like that's a comedy movie that like no matter who I've talked to, whether they're like an intellectual or someone who just likes really just like dumb mindless movies, like it seems like everybody seems to like that one. Like I thought it was interesting when I found out Christopher Nolan is a big fan of MacGruber, and he's such a he just comes off as such a self-serious British man that imagining him laughing at Will Forte having a stick of celery up his butt is just a very funny concept to me.
Because wasn't that a spinoff of Saturday Night Live?
Yeah, it's a Saturday Night Live skit, and I think that's the other thing too is like those movies normally aren't very good.
I liked Wayne's World.
Yeah, Wayne's World's classic.
Yeah, Wayne's World was classic. But yeah, there's some that were just awful. Like Night at the Roxbury I like that. Not everybody should like that, but that was kind of interesting at least. My favorite of the comedies, though, I think everybody should see is Dumb and Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber is a classic.
Yeah, it just carries to this day. You can watch that, and it's funny. And it's when you look at movies that are like older in the '90s and stuff, and you're not thinking about it. Think about the fact that they didn't have like the stuff that we have today. Like nobody was looking at a phone. Nobody had a phone, right? It's just constant banter, and I think that's one thing that they had back then going on, that there wasn't all of this technology around them. It was just way more the characters interacting. But that particular movie I could probably watch 10 more times in my life and enjoy it every single time.
Well, because it's just a very well written. And like Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels, they play off each other so well. But I have like a coworker who like Dumb and Dumber is one of his favorite movies, and he was just like when he was talking about it, he's like yeah, he's like I just love it because it's so stupid and so dumb. And I said to him, I was like, that's the thing. I was like, the movie's not dumb though. Like Dumb and Dumber is dumb. If Dumb and Dumber was actually a dumb movie, I don't think it would have the the classic status that it has today. I was like, the characters are dumb, but the movie is very well written and very intelligently. Like as a comedy movie, it has a lot of great bits and scenes and setup and payoffs, and the characters are dumb, but the movie itself is clever.
And that's a good point. There are a lot of like setups, a lot of bits within there. I mean, we landed on the moon.
Yeah.
Or big gulps, huh?
Yeah.
Well, see you later. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things throughout that movie that are quotable, and that like it's hard to find movies like that are as quotable as that consistently. What about what about like inspirational movies? What's your top?
I mean, honestly, the Rocky movies are kind of like the gold standard when it comes to inspirational movies. Where like, I think like those are, they're just so well, especially the first one, and like the sequels are kind of like the sequels progressively get like campier and cheesier, but the first one is such a legitimately just like scrappy underdog movie, and like I feel like if somebody watched like Rocky and didn't feel inspired by the end of it, I'd be like, it's like what's what's your problem? It's just like it has like that type of like that like Sylvester Stallone's positive attitude like comes through in the Rocky movies, and then like and like the Creed movies like that's my thing is like with inspirational movies I feel like you maybe don't get as many of those anymore because filmmakers are too afraid of being looked at as cringe or that's sappy or that's cheesy if like something is heartfelt or if like characters or like a main character is like crying or people are hugging or something like that. So I think like there's like this like some filmmakers are afraid of being too earnest, and so then like when Creed came out and that was directed by Ryan Coogler, who just he made Sinners recently, which is a big hit movie. But I remember when I watched Creed and like he's doing his whole training montage, and like the whole music that they play in the Rocky music, like fighting hard now and all that stuff. Like it feels very 70s and cheesy. And then in the Creed movie, which came out in 2015, the guy basically like does a newer version of that song with like a chorus of people like saying like fighting stronger and this and that. And I remember when I saw that in Creed, I was blown away. I was like, I'm amazed that like a modern movie is allowing itself to get so earnestly like cheesy and inspirational. You know?
Well, and I think it's something about fighting movies specifically that can do that. Like one of my favorites of all time is Cinderella Man.
That's a great movie too. Yeah.
Russell Crowe and Renee Zellweger. It's literally a movie I could watch over and over. But it's one of those that it's an emotional movie. It's not just about fighting, but like that's like he's fighting for his life, and a paycheck to keep his family done. And then he's a fighter, and he's been at the top, and then he goes down to the bottom, and he kind of climbs his way back up. That's amazing. And then one of the greatest dramas of all time is Shawshank Redemption. I mean, that was one I remember watching. Actually, Mom and Dad had rented it, and I was laying on the floor. 'Cause Dad was on the couch. And I woke up like 15 minutes into the movie starting. And then I just remember I couldn't have been more than 12, 13. And I was just captivated the entire time. And then I watched it in its entirety because I missed the first 15 minutes. And it's one of those movies where it's like, wow, that's so well written from start to finish. And there's so many layers of the story that you get involved with. So yeah, I agree with you because I can't really think of you're talking about being like earnest in that like vulnerability, so to speak. That's not like a chick flick, so no offense, but there's not a lot that have come out recently. Can you think of one like recently in the last couple of years where you've really like, oh man, that was on target with the earnestness?
See, I'm trying to think of like of all the. I've seen so many movies recently.
Probably not Mission Impossible, but
well, that's the thing. Well, even like the Mission Impossible movies, they have their they're earnest in their own ways. Like one of the things I appreciate about those movies is it's in the 6th Mission Impossible movie, but Tom Cruise is like flying a helicopter. It's like the big climax at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And he's chasing after the bad guy in the helicopter. And Tom Cruise's helicopter, it's like it's smoking, it's on fire, it's like all the lights in the helicopter are beeping and lighting up, and the helicopter's basically about to explode.
Yeah.
And Tom Cruise is just like so intent on flying that helicopter and achieving his mission and saving the world. And there's one line that like just like seals the whole deal for me, where Tom Cruise's character is just like, come on, not while I'm this close. And it's just like little character moments like that that like they just feel very that's exactly what that character would say. Like he's so intent on completing his mission that he's just like, not while I'm this close. It's like I've come in within an inch of my life every single time. He's like, I can't fail again, you know, or some, I don't know, but yeah, there was this movie that came out recently called it's called The Legend of Ochi. It didn't do very well, unfortunately. It's just another, you know, victim of poor marketing and a bunch of other issues that, you know, I don't know why people didn't go out to see it, but it felt like a old like Spielberg like movie from the 80s, like kind of like made for kids, but it's a little bit dark and a little bit scary. And but that's a movie that like there's some CGI in it, but a lot of the effects are like, you know, practical with puppets and animatronics, and they use like matte paintings and for the backgrounds instead of green screen and all that. And like there's like the feel of the movie. It has like this sense of like whimsy and like, you know, all that, and it feels like it's not afraid to get a little bit weird or a little bit scary or a little bit, you know, cheesy at times, just like Spielberg. You know, because a lot of people like giving Spielberg crap for that, whereas like, oh, his movies are so sappy and emotional and people are always hugging at the end and everything. I'm like, yeah, but you know, most of the time in his movies it feels earned, you know, all the character work and the plot building that's been building up to that, you know, that it, you know, if I felt the emotion, you know, then that's what they wanted.
What's your favorite Spielberg movie?
Raiders of the Lost Ark, the original Indiana Jones. That's probably my favorite movie ever, because I have I consider like it's what I call my holy trinity of movies, because I can't like, it's hard for me to pick like a favorite exactly, but like Raiders of the Lost Ark, John Carpenter's Halloween, and The Graduate are like my 3 favorite movies, and those are like the 3 where I'm like, I don't like saying one is better than the other. I prefer one or the other, but yeah, like the first Indiana Jones, that's like the gold standard of just movies in general, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, that is. Gosh, I haven't watched that in 25, 30 years probably. Yeah. I'll have to watch it again. I'll have the kids watch it.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll enjoy that. Yeah. Well, no, thanks for coming on today. Where can people find your reviews?
azfamily.com. So if you go to that website or Arizona's Family, look for that. We have a entertainment section that says movie reviews, and that's where you can find them all.
Awesome. Are you doing anything on social media yet?
Not yet, but I am looking into starting doing YouTube and TikTok, Instagram, you know, all that stuff, kind of, you know, expanding in any way that I can. Because
you and Grant had a podcast for quite some time. Is that stuff still archived?
I still have it. The audio stuff, I wasn't going to pay for SoundCloud anymore after a few years, but I still have all that stuff saved on my computer and everything. So
well, and I already know you can pretty much find him everywhere at HV Norris online. But you know, definitely start doing those things, because again, you bring a unique perspective. And I don't say that as a nepotism thing or you're my brother and all that. Like, you do bring a unique perspective, and although I don't always agree with it, which is the way it should be, I always love the way that you very candidly tell your story and your viewpoint on movies. So I think you would do super well, you know, in the social media world. And I've seen you on TV several times, you know, and you've done great there. But I think that media, and, you know, I hate to say it here on the podcast, is probably dying a little bit. Like, this is the type of thing that more people are gravitating to, because it's more genuine, it's less mass produced.
Yeah.
So like you putting out your viewpoints and those types of things on movies that are coming out and how you see it, and I think people would really gravitate to that, you know, through your own personality.
Yeah.
So, well, thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Well, I'm sure you guys enjoyed this. Share it with a friend. Share it with a movie friend. Go check them out on AZ Family. It does reviews every single week. They're always good, and we will see you next time.